Welcome to The Explainer. So, we've heard Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu announce that the conflict in Gaza is about to enter a Phase Two. But what does that actually mean? Today, we're diving into an analysis that suggests it's, well, a lot more complicated than it sounds.
So you hear that we are close to the second phase. It sounds pretty definite, right? But the analysis we're digging into today says, hold on a second. The reality on the ground is way more complicated. The argument is that this announcement might have less to do with a real military shift and a lot more to do with political timing, maybe even connected to a looming meeting with former President Trump.
Okay, here's our game plan. We're going to look at why this new phase seems to be stalled. Then, we'll get into the big sticking point, the weapons. After that, we'll explore the pressures Israel is facing at home, the messy road ahead, and wrap it all up with what this analysis calls the real political endgame.
All right, first up, a new phase begins. Let's talk about why this transition from Phase 1 to Phase 2 seems to be hitting a wall.
This is really the core question, isn't it? If Phase 1 is supposedly done, what's the holdup for Phase 2? Well, according to this analysis, the answer isn't just one simple thing. It's more like a perfect storm of issues all hitting at once. A major fight over weapons, a ton of pressure back home in Israel, and some seriously complex political maneuvering.
Okay, let's get into the nitty-gritty of it. At the absolute heart of this whole stalemate is one central issue: what to do with Hamas's weapons.
So check this out. The analysis points to this huge gap between the two sides. Hamas has apparently offered a solution: freeze their weapons, let an international group or another Palestinian party hold onto them for a couple of years. But Israel's goal, allegedly, is something totally different. They want a big media spectacle, a public surrender where weapons are handed right over to Israeli forces. It's all about creating an image of total victory.
And this is where it gets really fascinating. The key dispute, according to the source, isn't really about the method of disarmament, but the timeline, the meter. Israel is reportedly trying to shrink that 2-year proposal down to just a few months. Now think about what that implies. It suggests that behind the scenes, there might actually be some agreement on the idea of a third party holding the weapons. The public fight is all about how long that period lasts. It's a super subtle point, but it's absolutely critical.
And this all ties into a classic military term, DDR. It stands for disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration. It's kind of the standard playbook after a major conflict ends. But here's the catch. DDR is really built for dealing with heavy weapons, tanks, artillery, that kind of thing. The source argues it's just not a good fit for the kind of light guerrilla-style arms we're talking about here, which just makes a standard solution really, really tricky.
Now, this whole thing isn't just happening in a vacuum. Let's talk about the immense pressure Israel is facing back home, because it's having a huge impact on their strategy.
So what kind of pressure are we talking about? Well, the analysis lays out a few big ones. First, the high political cost of a war that just keeps dragging on. Then, you've got a massive budget crisis brewing in the Knesset over defense spending. And of course, there's the human element, the incredible strain on the military, especially on the reservists who've been called up from their everyday lives for months.
And to put a real number on that human cost, the source cites an official figure of 81,000 Israeli personnel wounded or injured. I mean, just let that sink in. A number that high isn't just a statistic. It creates huge ripples through society and puts incredible pressure on the government to find a different way forward.
So with all that pressure building up, what's the new plan? This is where Israel's strategy for Phase 2 supposedly starts to look very different.
Yeah, we're not talking about traditional ground combat anymore. The reported new strategy involves a few key shifts. First, cutting back the number of reservists. Second, moving to what's being called comfortable hunting, basically more selective intelligence-based strikes. And third, and this is a big one, trying to rely on proxy wars by using local armed militias inside Gaza. But according to this analysis, that last part is already failing. And if things are tricky on the ground, they're just as messy internationally. You know that idea of a multinational peacekeeping force? Well, apparently it's having a really hard time getting started. We're hearing that key nations have apparently declined or withdrawn. Pakistan said no, Azerbaijan withdrew its offer, and even prominent figures like Tony Blair are said to be stepping away. It's just not coming together.
All right, this brings us to our final section. And honestly, this might be the most critical piece of the puzzle, because it argues that the military stalemate is all tied to a much, much larger political endgame.
So the source claims that Netanyahu has laid out 5 conditions for ending the whole operation. Now, some of them are what you might expect, security-related stuff. But one of them,
One of them stands out as being purely political, and it could reframe the entire conflict.
And here it is, the alleged condition, the abolition of the term refugee. Yeah, you heard that right. This isn't about weapons or borders. This is about changing the actual vocabulary used to describe the Palestinian people and their history.
And the alleged implications here are profound. According to the analysis, this isn't just about semantics. It's a strategic move to de-internationalize the Palestinian issue, to formally nullify the right of return, and to fundamentally reshape the political landscape of the entire region. It's a massive political move. Ultimately, this analysis leaves us with a pretty provocative thought. When immediate military goals become so deeply intertwined with long-term political ambitions, what is the true price of peace? What does it mean for our resolution when the very terms of the conflict are themselves a battleground?